Hi, I'm Simon Bridges, CEO of the Auckland Business Chamber. It's great to be online for another Business Insights webinar that we do weekly, giving you insight into some really interesting things. Today, it's fantastic to have Carlos Chambers with us of Carbon Invoice. He's got an amazing story, I think, pretty inspiring actually to tell us around some of the work that he is doing in Auckland and elsewhere. So, Carlos, great to have you with us. Really looking forward to hearing from you and having a bit of a discussion towards the end of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. Great to be here and great to be with the Auckland Chamber members. Now let's get the admin done. I'll just share my screen. All right. So good morning, Auckland Business Chamber. As Simon said, I'm Carlos Chambers, CEO and founder Carbon Invoice, and keen to talk to you today about sustainability, moving from a nice to have into a priority area for Auckland small businesses, and indeed something that can be a competitive advantage. The market forces driving this are not just about doing good, they're also about creating tangible business opportunities for those who act. And I think there's real risks for those who ignore this for too long. I think many of you will already be seeing this topic on the rise and growing in relevance, whether it's clients asking for sustainability credentials, whether you're seeing competitors out there making noise about their own, or whether it's just more conversations around the water cooler. There's been some big weather events in Auckland, which I'm sure have surfaced some of this. So keen to talk through basically four things today. Firstly, the changing business landscape and trends which are relevant to Auckland small and medium business owners and their teams. Secondly, I'll tell a few stories from local Auckland businesses that I know who are really leading the way and grabbing hold of that competitive advantage. And thirdly, we'll bust a few of the common myths which I think small businesses tell or think about this space. And lastly, we've got a cool invitation to all of you to join us at a planting day and a special offer. So stay tuned for that. So quick background on me and Carbon Invoice. Carbon Invoice exists to deliver seriously simple carbon action to small and medium business owners like you. What do we mean by that? We basically do three things. We have software which measures businesses' carbon footprint automatically for free. So we do that by plugging into your accounting system and analyzing the costs and expenses, and then building up an understanding of your carbon footprint that way. Secondly, we help you fund the planting of native trees to compensate for your carbon footprint. You don't have to lift a finger. We go and plant those trees in Auckland in the places where you work, live and play. So they're local, they're only native, and they wouldn't have been planted without you. And then thirdly, we help you share the great work you've been doing in order to make your brand stand out and to win business. So we make your marketing both credible and authentic and powerful. We're just going to year 3 as a business. We are Kiwi homed and headquartered. We're the #1 zero app globally in their sustainability category based on user reviews. And we've so far put 57,000 native trees in the ground. So yeah, getting some great traction. For my part, I've been a commercial lawyer. So I used to work in the Vero building, just not far from where you are, Simon, at a firm called Russell McVeigh, and then worked on climate advocacy for a few years with a group called Generation Zero, giving young New Zealanders who cared about climate change a place to go. And then I've built a couple of financial technology businesses as well, which all has kind of led me to the conclusion of how do you help small businesses take credible action in this space. We absolutely love Auckland. A lot of our community is here. We launched our business in late 22 at our first customer Potentia's offices down on Custom Street. We've got customers all over the city like Tribe Recruitment, Flight Digital, People to People. And we've run planting days in Auckland in 2024. Fun fact, our largest New Zealand tree cluster is on Motatapu Island, and then our second largest is on the Papakura stream, so just south of the city. So let's talk about the changing business landscape. I think there's some things going on now. There's some things growing in relevance, which are coming soon. And then there's a bit of stuff coming later to keep your eye on. I think the first point to emphasize for small and medium businesses is we are in a voluntary market for sustainability and carbon action. There's no legal or regulatory requirement for you to do anything. But it's that voluntary market where there's commercial or social drivers and some policy changes which are encouraging people to start thinking about this space. Now, my pick is one day we will be in a regulated and compliance environment. And I think what that will mean for a small business is you will have some form of annual activity to understand your carbon footprint, understand the climate risks relating to your business, and you'll probably have to file some sort of carbon statement. I think that's quite a long way off. I think we're, earliest 2030 is my pick. I could be wrong, but I don't see politicians being in a huge hurry to regulate small businesses. And I think it's a hard pill to swallow when they are, overall the individually the smaller emitters. And if we turn our minds to what are those forces happening today, I think there's three in order of importance. The first is you are seeing supply chain pressure from bigger businesses who are putting pressure on smaller businesses to start to demonstrate their sustainability posture and show what they're doing. And a lot of those big businesses are themselves regulated. So in New Zealand, we have about 200 of our largest financial securities issuers, including telcos and banks and insurers. Those businesses are starting to ask their suppliers, hey, can you tell us what your carbon footprint is? And that's a very rational thing for them to do. It's because between 40 and 60% of their own carbon footprint sits in their supply chain. If you're working with offshore corporates from Europe, especially if you're working with offshore corporates from Australia, you'll see that trend growing because of how far ahead Europe is. In Australia, that number of corporates who are captured by their climate disclosure regulation is closer to 6,000 as of 1 January. So there is this growing supply chain pressure force which affects small businesses who supply larger ones. And that's proving to be a real commercial driver. Secondly, I think there's consumer and client preferences changing. People are starting to ask the question more, and there's quite a lot of data on this in New Zealand. And then thirdly, I think there's a competitive aspect which is a little bit more abstract, but there's basically very few businesses have taken a front foot on sustainability. So there is this opportunity to go first, and I think the ones who are going first are starting to accrue benefits. So those, I think, are the key things going on for SMEs today. Now, I talk about the employee opportunity coming soon. I think that's in play today. What we mean by that is basically the sought after Generation Y and Generation Z are increasingly interested in sustainability credentials from their employers. So I dug up a bit of data. 48% of millennials and 54% of Gen Z say that they are putting pressure on their employer to take climate action. That's New Zealand data from Deloitte's survey, N of about 1,000 from last year. Secondly, the investment and insurance side. Now, as I talked about, the big banks and insurers, they are increasingly needing to understand their own climate risks. And so they're offering some carrots in the form of green loans to small businesses where you can borrow money in order to decarbonize your business. That might be, concrete example, buying an electric car or putting some solar panels on your office roof if you own it. But they will lend you capital for that specific purpose. They're also holding out some sticks. And this is mostly with bigger businesses now, but they're doing these financial products called sustainability linked loans, where as well as paying back the money, you have some sustainability goals that you set. And if you hit those goals, then your interest rate drops and or you get more attractive covenants and incentives. So to be clear, those are largely being used by the bigger businesses today, but the banks, I think from my conversations with various bankers, they intend to roll those out across more of the market so that the banks can decarbonize their loan book. And on the insurance side, it's similar. There's increasing prudential regulation, which means those insurers need to consider climate risks in their insurance book. And so I think I suspect you'll see, decarbonized or green insurance policies and requests for more information from small businesses. So I think keep an eye on those two. They're definitely in play today, but probably coming soon in terms of actually shaping small business behavior. And then lastly, as we talked about, we'll probably get to the regulatory side at some point. But I think we've got a few years to think about that. So let's not spend too much time on that. So a bit of data just to support those statements. I think now the shift is already happening. On that supply chain pressure, we are seeing in New Zealand weighting anywhere between 5 and 20% on sustainability and ESG broadly. And it's coming up in preferred supplier panels where you might be pitching to get appointed to the One New Zealand panel. It's coming up. It was coming up in government, around the all of government side a lot. I think that's dialed down a bit by the current administration, but we'll see what they come out with on their next round of procurement. And I wanted to share this specific example. A few of our customers received a notice from One New Zealand end of last year in December 24. And One New Zealand was basically asking, specifically, we would like to know how much carbon has been emitted by your company when producing the goods or services you supply to One New Zealand. So these guys, used to be Vodafone household name. They are emailing all of their suppliers and asking them to hand over their carbon footprint data. So I thought that was super interesting as a tangible example. And we've seen that come from other quarters. Spark have done the same thing maybe 18 months ago. Littleton Port were another example quite recently. This is not a super isolated event. It's coming up more and more. Some EY data from Ernst & Young data from last year. So 1 in 4 Kiwis willing to pay more for products and services produced in a sustainable way. I thought that was quite interesting. It looked like despite the cost of living, other concerns potentially on small businesses and consumers' mind, there was still this desire and impetus, at least stated impetus to say, yeah, I would pay slightly more for goods and services produced sustainably. And then this one actually surprised me going and looking at it. 84% of Kiwis in 2023 believe businesses have a responsibility to reduce their contribution to climate change by reducing their emissions. Now, this is versus the global average of 76, and that was Ipsos data with sample size a couple of thousand. So that was interesting because it was higher than government and it was higher than individual consumers as well. And then lastly, I talked about that competitive differentiation opportunity. We've run the numbers a few times. I'm not sure we've got this exactly right down to the basis point, but we think that about 1 in 20 privately held Kiwi businesses are actively measuring their carbon footprint, which means that there's 19 out of 20 who are not. And when those requests come from corporates or from clients who are starting to choose, there is a genuine advantage for those, for those 7,000 or 8,000 Kiwi businesses who are actually going and getting it done. Okay, so let's talk about a few local success stories. And I'll just caveat, these are the businesses that some of the businesses I'm close to and have worked with. They are people-powered or services businesses, so they don't represent all of the economy because that's who Carbon Invoice primarily works with. But I think the stories are common and applicable. So Shannon Barlow, she's the MD of Frog Recruitment. They're an Auckland-based recruitment firm. Offices on Queen Street. And she's telling us that more and more your approach to sustainability and having measurable outcomes are commonplace in tenders from large corporates and NZ government. And I think the thing that she's done is she's implemented carbon measurement and tree funding in her business. And it's meant they're now on the front foot when these requests arrive. And Shannon's even proactively attaching that information in every pitch or proposal they submit. I think there is an opportunity to engage clients and customers around sustainability. So Ian McGibbon, he runs Farrow Jameson, they're an exec search company. And I thought his quote was nice. When we started our partnership with Carbon Invoice, our intention was to offset our carbon footprint. But as we worked with the team, we found that even greater engagement came about from planting the trees ourselves. So Ian got out there last year with his business partner and wife, Rosemary, and their team of exec search folks. And they planted a whole lot of the trees themselves. And then they sent out a customer newsletter at Christmas time, sort of talking about what they'd done. And the thing that he said surprised him was 4 of their clients came back and said, "That is awesome. How do we get involved?" So Ian's responded to that, and he set up a planting day in May on the Papakura stream just for him and his clients. And that'll be a forum where they're spending time with their clients doing something fun and impactful, which advances both sides' sustainability policies. And then third example, Grant Johnson. So Rocket Spark, they're a website builder, like a Wix or a Squarespace competitor. Cool New Zealand story, have carved out a little niche for themselves there. And for Grant, it was more about personal responsibility and business responsibility. They now measure all of their carbon footprint and have a range of reduction initiatives in place, as well as funding native trees. And he saw this opportunity because they serve graphic designers and small businesses. And he thought, if we can get those guys and girls involved in this effort, then it's a real cool community building aspect, and a point of difference for Rocket Spark in what the website space is a very crowded market. So a few stories there. I think in summary, there's an opportunity around around getting your business fit and engaging your clients, around taking sustainability action. And there is some genuine benefits that these folks who go first are starting to accrue. And I think in the not too distant, it's even happening now. Those who ignore these risks, will suffer the consequences. And it could look like lost revenue, frustrated clients, disenfranchised clients. All right, let's do a bit of myth busting. So if I've convinced you so far that carbon action is something that is worth looking into, what are the things stopping you? And these are some of the stories or myths that we hear from businesses. Number one, probably most common, it's too expensive, it's too difficult, too hard basket. And I think the reality is modern technology has really cut the costs of taking sustainability action significantly. There's a fun example that I'll take you through. So for Rocket Spark, who we just met, Grant Johnson, it took them basically a year of thinking and deciding about doing something. And really, it took them about 10 minutes to actually get that measurement done and go live. So they decided they should take action. They researched the options. They looked at, consultants, software and tree planting, spoke with us, asked a whole lot of questions, then did nothing. It fell to the bottom of the priority pile. Asked lots of questions again, and then got founder approval. And then 10 minutes later, they had measured their carbon footprint, had an initial understanding of it, and knew where those key areas to reduce and mitigate were. So this is another slide that Grant shared with me and said I could use for another presentation he'd done. Myth number 2, we don't have the expertise. We're not climate scientists, we're not experts, we just don't have the expertise. And you don't need the expertise. Look, it is a dense space, and it can be an overwhelming one. but there are third parties out there who you can work with to rely on for your measurement and your action. And it's you don't have to have that on team. So a customer of ours who I think believed this is Oxygen Advisors, offices bottom of Queen Street. They're a VCFO service. And they were able to use ready-made solutions without adding headcount or any upskilling. Myth number 3, we just can't handle the process change. We're so busy. Get it, you're a small business. Many of the systems today integrate with your existing systems. So in Carbon Invoice's case, we plug into your accounting software and analyze your expenses. There is no process change. You don't have to add new accounts or change any of the way you're doing things. And I give an example. Clockworks, Angela, who runs outsourced bookkeeping business, they're an interesting example because these guys are obsessed about single process. That's what bookkeeping's about. So she was quite blown away when she saw what we could do without any change to how they do things. Number 4, our footprint is too small to matter. We don't really have a big footprint, doesn't matter. I think, every business has an impact. And as we've seen, increasingly clients care. So I think it's less about how big your footprint is and more about how you're taking responsibility for that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think showing that you're doing something is actually very convincing and persuasive, no matter how big your footprint is. Number 5, they're getting stiffer, these objections. I don't believe in climate change. That's okay. I think you don't have to. You just have to believe that it's the right thing to do for your business. I have really, been on my own journey here. I think I used to think about it much more belief and political based, but it really isn't. It's just about doing the right thing for your business, which also happens to be the right thing for your community, future generations, all of that. But you can do that even if you don't believe in climate change. And we work with people along the range of spectrums. Cool. So, okay. So just a quick view of, you might be thinking at this point, okay, I'm interested. What are the actual pathways? I've talked quite a lot about the software pathway. I think there are 3 broad pathways for small businesses in New Zealand. One is you do it yourself. Kiwis have a tendency to lean into this pathway. I think in reality, it's a good thing if you already have people on your team who are expert in the sustainability space, or if you've already decided to hire, an extra resource to focus on that. Gives you quite a lot of control and intimacy with the process and what you do. And I think if you're really going to bet everything on sustainability, then this would potentially be a good pathway for you. Number 2, which I think has been the de facto or the dominant pathway, is engaging a third-party consultant. The good news is they'll give you, expert guidance and information. Pretty valuable if you've got, for example, a really complex supply chain with a whole lot of carbon in there that you really need to get a good grip on. Or if you've got very complicated dynamics shaping your business, then I think consultants can add a lot of value. But do be aware that it will come with added cost. I mean, typically you're in the tens of thousands to get going, and it can go much higher than that. But good option if you want and are willing to pay for personalized support. And then the software pathway. So as we've talked about a bit, implement third-party solutions like Carbon Invoice. There are others out there as well. Perfect for time and resource-strapped small businesses, and perfect if you like Grant and you want to skip the fuss and the hand-wringing and the paralysis by analysis and get on with it. Now, there's an image here of trying to understand your carbon footprint. And I just wanted to tell what I think is a funny anecdote. When in my previous business, we went out to measure and understand our own carbon footprint, so a 12-person technology firm. And through that process, it took us about 4 or 5 months to actually get our measurement done. And the sort of apex of the moment was our marketing manager came to me and said, the consultants want me to weigh our rubbish, and I've just found the line. I will not do it. And it was the penny drop moment for Carbon Invoice. I thought, look, if I'm a small business owner with a team of 12 and I have to weigh my rubbish for 6 weeks, then this space is not accessible. So that was what part of the impetus for us to go and figure out a more accessible and compelling way for small businesses. So if that's you, then yeah, the software pathway is probably for you. Okay, so wrapping up now. I think in summary, yeah, the market forces are clear. So we are in the voluntary market phase. You're not required to do anything as a small, medium business, but I think the business case on the commercial side, on the brand side, on the employee and competition side is real, and it's accelerating. And I think that the trend is, I think it's irreversible, but it's definitely a steady trend towards more business drivers for carbon action. Number 2, myths busted. Carbon action is actually easier and more rewarding than you thought. And hopefully I've dispelled a few of those common myths. Thirdly is join the community. Join our community or join a community, because alone I think our impact as individuals and small business owners is limited. It can feel pretty overwhelming, but I think if you're doing it alongside others like you, we can be more powerful, and together our impact adds up. We can make a difference. What's next? We would love to see you at Auckland's Planting Action Day. So we're running these events in 2025, basically with a goal of building community around carbon action. And our first Auckland one is at the Papakura Stream, Friday the 9th of May in the morning from 9:30 to 1:30. It's about 35 minutes drive from the city and good traffic. And yeah, there'll be other members of the community who are taking sustainability action, some of who I've talked about today there. Great time. Come out, spend 2 hours planting native trees. We'll give you lunch, take a few photos, and all leave feeling better off for it. So we've got 2 offers for Auckland Business Chamber members. Sorry, we've got 1 offer, 2 tickets for Auckland Business Chamber members, basically $25 for a Planting Action Day ticket, off the retail rate of $100. So if that sounds like you, grab your phone and scan that QR code, and that'll take you off to the ticket site. Love to see you there. Hopefully we'll see you there as well, Simon.
Sounds great. No, that's fantastic. Hey, well, thanks so much, Carl. It's really cool. I mean, there's a lot in what you're saying. I think, if we just think about the business case for this, for a business, really interested in what I understood were your 2 big initiatives, that measuring carbon footprint from accounting is very interesting. But even more so, because I think we can all see on the screen there, the planting of the trees. It's a great achievement, 57,000. I think what I think is interesting is even for the climate denier, as you say, who sits there and says, or maybe not even the climate denier, just someone who's cynical about the extent to which they can influence it. I think you making the point there is a business case, or the way I might talk about it would be, there's plenty of co-benefits. Yes, you're doing a climate change good, but if you're out with your team planting trees, it's great team building. You're doing something in your local community potentially, which is, you can reference back for sort of reputational benefit and, brand and all of these things. So yeah, there's lots of co-benefits, aren't there?
Yeah, I think that's right. Spot on, Simon. There's lots of co-benefits. We tend to focus on some of those more pointy commercial benefits, mainly because that's where I think the environmental movement has lost its way a bit, and has fallen short. But yeah, there's huge array of co-benefits, and I think to touch on those ones you talked about, I think small businesses care deeply about their community, and most want to give back in some way, shape, or form. And getting native trees into the ground in the places where they work, live, and play, I think is a very compelling way to do that in New Zealand for Auckland businesses.
Definitely. I mean, I think another one that you've mentioned, but I'd just be interested in a bit more on it is, it could well help you in a tender situation or the like. How would you, is that a case of referencing it in your tender documents, or how's that work practically, would you say?
Yeah, great question. So three main questions that we see coming up in the tender scenario. One is, tell us about your sustainability policy or goals. Two is, tell us what you've done to advance those. Those one and two are the most common. And then thirdly is the One New Zealand example, which I shared, which is, please tell us how much carbon has been created by you as a goods or services supplier, as part of your relationship with us. So I think those are the three questions that you're likely to come across in the tenders, and the weightings can vary. It's anywhere from 5 to 20%, and it depends a bit on on who's asking the question. So you need to answer those questions. The way that we help our customers, like Shannon from Frog Recruitment, or Tribe Recruitment, another example that springs to mind, or Webb Henderson, another customer of ours, is we give them the information. We give them their carbon footprint in a report. We tell them how many, they're able to see how many trees they've funded. They're able to see where those trees are. They're able to see how much carbon those trees will sequester over time. And all of that is within our software app. So they basically click a button and we produce an up-to-date certificate, which has all of that information across about 7 or 8 pages. It also has all of the disclaimers around what is not true, what you're not, and this is a trap that small businesses can fall into. You can say the wrong thing, which turns into greenwashing, or you can be too scared to say anything, which people call green hushing. So we have created
Love it.
we've created a document which solves all of that, and they can attach alongside their tender response or as part of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. One side, if you're not careful, you're greenwashing. On the other side, you're hushing. You want to be right in the middle with good, accurate information about what it is you're doing. Yeah, it's
I think it's just, I mean, you and I both got legal backgrounds. I think it's just talking honestly and
yeah.
factually about what you've done.
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, and I think, what's probably possibly implicit in everything you've been saying, but if we think again just about that tree planting as this good practical thing that we can do. Obviously you had there that great offer, and I appreciate that. That's really cool, around the 9th of May. And I've checked my diary actually, possibly I could. We'll see how we go. I don't want to promise online yet. Let's just,
Well, I promise I will hold a ticket
but
for you.
I'd like to. But so that is one option to come along to that broader thing. Of course, what you also do, in my sense, is they're very affordable. Really, is you'll also, if it's a business of, 25 people or something, you'll do the planting for that business, and the costing and stuff of that's pretty good too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So first point is, you do not need to be a Carbon Invoice customer to come to the planting days. They're a community building event open to everyone. We want people from business, but you don't have to be a Carbon Invoice customer, and we don't expect that. Number two, what does it cost? So if you think about it in revenue terms, for $1 million of revenue, it would be, you're looking at anywhere from $2,000 a year up to say $15,000 a year. And that depends a bit. It depends exclusively on how carbon intensive your business is. So if you're at the
Right.
lower end, then it'll be very affordable. And if you're at the more carbon intensive end, then more trees needed. But that would be the range. We
And
do.
are
We also.
you, and I'm sorry, I might have missed the point here, but are you taking care of the planting for that, or is that something that would still be that sort of a event where staff would come out, maybe with whānau or something and do it? How's that work?
Yeah, great question. So no, we will plant the trees for all of our customers.
Right,
And then they will also be invited, but they don't have to come to planting days.
right.
So those two things are separate. Just on the pricing point, Simon, we do have a calculator on our website. So you can get a rough and you can get an indication
Yeah.
of your number. And then if you want to go further, then you basically just hook up your accounting software and you get your carbon measurement in 3 minutes. So
Yeah,
that's.
but for a smaller business, it's not many tens of thousands. So
Yeah,
that's
and
I
just to
mean,
round out, Simon, on the business case, so if you're paying 10,000 a year on, if you're paying 1,000 a year on 1 million of revenue, then what do you need to clear? What needs to be true for you to get that back? Well, you've got to win a tender with, you got to win one tender, and one tender might be worth 100,000. 20% weighting on that, so you can 20 or 25,000 of the revenue is due to your carbon action, meaning you've cleared 20k plus. So yeah, that's how we think about the business case.
fantastic. I mean, one of the things I thought was, really interesting in your kind of the changing landscape discussion and where this is all going is, at one level we're sort of in this age of Trump, and we all have our views of that, but different views of it. But it means that the so-called DEI and ESG and so on are very much at one level with decision makers. Um, certainly in that biggest, most powerful country out of fashion. But I suppose, Murray, without putting words into your mouth, would I be right to say what your sort of view would be? Well, but in the end, the long-term trend and where this is all going isn't going away. And so and it hasn't really hit New Zealand fundamentally yet, this backlash, if you want. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked. I think as you've articulated it based on how I see it. I was in Australia last week, in Sydney, and the view there is basically what you said. It hasn't hit in Australia yet. In fact, they're going very hard with primary regulation legislation on climate disclosures. So in some ways, they're running the other way to the Trump deregulation side. Now, that's not to say it won't, but my prediction is America retrenches because Trump hates war and wants to, leverage America's position as much as possible, and America's influence, on global supply chains dials down. That won't happen immediately, and America's political influence, dials down. I think the caveat is it's an uncertain time, right? I mean, how the heck do you predict anything? You've just got to play the hand you've got in the next, months or few years. So we'll see. We'll have to watch that space. But on the other hand, you have this, this death march or this irreversible trend around the climate warming. You have most countries, in fact, almost all countries have net zero targets for 2050, and most have them for 2030 or 2035.
Mm.
So governments have kind of gone and done the work now, and they've got the levers to pull the economy and population forward with. So I tend to think it's irreversible, which I would not have said 10 years ago or even 6 or 7 years ago, but I think we're now at a point of policy, regulation, societal views, that the march towards figuring this out is a one-way march.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Hey, well, look, we really appreciate having you, Carlos, and really insightful and but also practical presentation around, what people can be thinking about and more than that, doing but in a meaningful way on climate change and sustainability. So no, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Simon. Hope to see you at the planting day and see some of your
I knew
Auckland
you'd
Chamber
come back to
members
that,
at the
but
planting
yeah,
day.
no, look,
Yeah.
probably. Let's go with probably.
Yeah, nice. We'll save a seat for you.
Cheers.
There's a spade with your name on it.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks all.